Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. Well, once again, I have a very special guest, and he is another author. I know Fresh Catholic is doing a lot of episodes this year with authors, and Lori Balderas is reading more books than she's read in years. I know my mother is pleased as punch. But the difference of this book, first of all, it's a very different book, and I can't wait to dive into it because my guest sent it to me, and I absolutely loved it. And don't tell him, but I'm a super fan. So I don't know how many fans he has, but I have a feeling I'm the president of his fan club. So contact me if you want to be a part of my group. Let me tell you about my guest today. His name is Jeff Jones. He's an author, and he is a passionate Catholic living in South Carolina. He is a retired U.S. Air Force intelligence analyst who worked nearly a decade as a law enforcement crime analyst. I'm so sorry. I'm so excited. I can't even talk. He is a Catholic revert who got back into the church when he met his now wife, and they've been married for 30 years. So right there, that's just amazing in itself. Jeff Jones wrote a book called Unforeseeable, and he sent it to me, and I just gobbled it up. I thought it was an amazing book. I can't wait to talk to him about it. So without any more time passing, let me introduce you to Jeff Jones. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Lori.
How are
I'm
you?
so happy and excited to be here.
I'm happy. As you can tell, I'm happy and excited to have you here. We did our pre-interview, and I told Jeff I could have just kept talking to him. We could have just talked for days, and I said, I guess we should save it for the podcast.
Absolutely.
I feel like we talked for an hour, but maybe we didn't. I don't know. Anyway, I am very happy to have you as a guest. I'm glad you reached out to me about your book. And so we'll get into some questions pretty soon here, but I just wanted to ask you right off the top, is this your first book you've written?
Yes, this is my first published book.
Oh my goodness. First of all, if the volume is a little low on him when he's speaking to me, is it okay? Just checking with production. Sorry. I gotta ask my producer. Anyway, it is your first published book.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Very, very good job then. Good job. And before we get too far into it, I know I just read about you, and this is just a little snippet into you, but is there anything that my audience would be interested to know about you? So you were raised Catholic because you're a revert.
Yes. Essentially what happened, I was born into the Catholic Church. I was baptized Catholic, baptized in a little town called Michigan City, Indiana. It is just east of Chicago, St. Stanislaus Church there. And when my father and my mother drifted apart, I went to live with my father, who wasn't terribly religious, but that's okay. And then in my early 20s, I met an absolutely amazing woman, my wife, Kim. She got me back into the church. We got back. I started, going to mass. I went through all the sacraments, baptism, not baptism, confirmation, first communion, all of that. And that was at a little church right here in South Carolina, Saint Joseph's in Chester, South Carolina, and just that's that's how I got back into the church, was the amazing woman that has been married to me for, 30 years now.
That's beautiful. Well, God always has a plan of how to get people to the church, back to the church, and we just have to be a willing participant. And sometimes it just takes a good woman.
Yes, it
Ask my
does.
husband, Simon Balderas. That's what got him back into the church too. This one. So, well,
Yes.
that's really good to know. And then you've obviously had quite a successful professional life, and now you're retired. So is this what you decided you'd like to do, is get into writing?
Yes, I've always been, somewhat interested in writing. During school, I was told that, I had a very good imagination, but never really tried to pursue it. But after spending, 20 years in the military as a military intelligence analyst, and then I spent almost a decade outside of the military doing law enforcement crime analysis. I tend to have, of course, tend to have a very analytical mind. I try to think things on multiple layers, and just something about a year and a half ago, just something came to me, spoke to me, and said that I needed to write this book.
Interesting. Well, and I know that you also told me that you were writing it, and then all of a sudden you got a like an epiphany of how to finish the book. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, I started out the basic story. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know how this wants to go. And then just as I was starting to wrap the book up, it was really something I really can't describe, because the majority of the last chapter, I felt like, um and this is actually a phrase that readers will see in the book. I felt something far above me was dictating how to finish the book.
I believe it. I believe that. That's really amazing. I love to hear things like that, where we just again we are open to the Holy Spirit working through us, and instead of fighting it, we go with it, and that's, what we should do. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, but when you do, you know, um just surrender to it, that's where
Right.
some of our best decisions are made, right?
I agree, and it's honestly, that last chapter's one of my favorite parts of the book.
Well, I don't think I have a favorite part. I thought it was so good. Um, so you described this book, Unforeseeable, as it's a little screw tape letters, a little, say it again, I'm never going to get this right,
Faustian Bargain.
Faustian Bargain, and a little Christmas Carol. So I agree with that. And it definitely touches on three hot button topics in our society today, which we'll get to in a
Yes.
minute. And you say where most traditional stories have a bad guy and a good guy, this story has a bad guy and a worse guy.
Yes.
And I think that's so true about this book. Now, I was telling you in our pre-interview. First of all, I went into this, I read this that you sent me, this little
Mhm.
description of how you would describe it. I read that. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And again, for my audience, I get sent now a lot of books to choose from. What am I going to read? What am I going to think that I'm interested in and my audience will be interested in? This book was very different than anything I've read. Um, what I what the reason I'm excited about it, there's many reasons I'm excited about it. Besides the fact it's a really really good book. It's like it's just, I think I told you, like, I felt like, I didn't say it like this. I'll say it like this now. I felt like I jumped on a sled and then I went down a hill. Just went the whole way. I don't think there was a lull in this book. I'm
Well,
thinking
and
there wasn't a moment where I thought, oh, let's get past this. I felt the whole thing I was riveted to the book.
We'll be right back. What does it mean to live a life of faith? What does it mean to live as a Catholic Christian? Hi, this is Bishop Kevin Sweeney, host of the podcast Beyond the Beacon. Join me as we unravel and discuss the mysteries of our faith, of the church, of living as Catholic Christians. Be inspired by engaging interviews with priests and seminarians, deacons, religious, women and men who live the life of faith day by day here in our Diocese of Paterson, in food pantries and classrooms and parishes and ministry. How is God working in their lives today? How is God working in our lives? Join me as I ask them and be part of the conversation on Beyond the Beacon. Listen and follow Beyond the Beacon wherever you get your podcasts, or watch it on my YouTube channel. Please check the show notes for more details. Thank you and God bless you.
And I've had people who have read the book have the when it comes to the pace of the book, they describe it as, in the beginning, you've got kind of the steady, almost, J.R.R. Tolkien world building type phase. And then once you hit a certain point, and as the reader, you'll know exactly where that point is. Once you hit a certain point, you suddenly shift into like another gear, and it goes into almost like a fast-paced C.S. Lewis type
Yes.
style.
Well, and I felt you were really you were really describing your characters well. I was really envisioning them. I could smell I could feel the whole thing. I thought you did a great job with that. And this book, just so everybody knows, this is, I would say, I'm wondering when you created this book, what's your audience that you're trying to target? Because I kind of have my own thoughts about it, but I want to know, because you're the author, what were you envisioning? Who are you trying to reach with this book?
I think with this book, this book is intended to reach out to the people who they're kind of those borderline. They like the scary books, the scary stories, and that's kind of their niche. But with this book, I kind of took that, almost like that style and that mindset, and kind of tried to pull that person back a little bit to, hey, you can get really, intense stories like this, but still have a good message.
Right. So just so my audience knows, so some of the books I've been reading, well, first of all, to back up, since I've become Catholic and I am reading a lot of Catholic-based books, they're typically instructional, I would call them. They're like, just about like the doctrine, about, prayers, how to do things properly. Those are the books I've been reading for years. And now that suddenly I'm having all these books presented to me, what I'm excited about, and I think I told you this, is that I feel we need books that are entertaining to Catholics, that have a message to Catholic people specifically. So that, because I was also telling you, we're in the film industry. We don't think that there's enough quality Catholic or Christian movies and shows being made, like what we would consider really good, high quality. They're few and far between. And it's unfortunate because, I don't feel comfortable going to certain movies and watching certain things. They go against my morals and my ethics. I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to spend money on them. I don't want to fund people who are making things like that. I'd rather fund things, that are going to be worthwhile. I'll pay to go see a Mel Gibson movie. I'll pay to go see a Mark Wahlberg movie. But I think that that's important. And I think it's equally as important in what we're reading, because we don't want to be reading something that doesn't align with our faith, So the books I've been reading lately, like Catholic Joe, I had my guest, the author of that book came on, Stephen Thomas. I'm in the middle of reading that book. It's amazing. I love it. I think it's a manly man book, but I'm a woman and I'm enjoying it. So, and then, I'm being presented with these different books that I think are awesome, but yours is very remarkably different. And one thing that I think I think it's scary. I think it's edgy. I think it's like, it grips you. I think it's uncomfortable. I think it's like there's moments where I'm not uncomfortable, but the person in it is,
Yes.
I think it has so many good lessons. I think it's a super brave book. I think you're really brave to write this book, and I support you in that bravery. And the reason I say that is because you're hitting on really hot button topics in our world today that are hard to talk about because we as Christians, we as Catholics get backlash for feeling the way we do about certain subjects. And you're just going into these subjects, and you're not just going into them, you're showing how somebody's decisions, how somebody's choices, how somebody's thoughts can really dictate the future, certainly. It's like what your past has done dictates your future. What choices you make dictate your future. If you make the wrong choice and decision and you're not thinking in the proper way, you're going to go off the rails. And the character in this, Stephen, certainly finds that out the hard way.
Yes. And you mentioned earlier a lot of the stuff for Catholics to read out there are more instructional, more manual. This is how you do this type thing, and I think that's where this book is different in that it takes real world issues, real world concerns, and it actually shows where those things actually intersect with Catholic teaching.
Right, right. And I know we were also saying before that we do need books like this, where people can have an outlet. Like, again, this one, that's why I was interested to know your audience, because I think, right now, there's a lot of people that are interested in murder mystery shows or books or, things that are edgy. But this book also, it has such a lesson to it, and I was saying to you, I feel like I'm so proud of you with this because you are being brave. And I don't think a lot of people feel like they can be brave. And I think these are a lot of things I think most priests should be talking about in their homilies, are these more, kind of uncomfortable things that we need to talk about. And it's like, I think now, that we're moving into a new administration and there's a new way, kind of what I call getting back to some normalcy or some traditional thought patterns, that this is a good time for this book to come out, I would think.
Yes, and it's one of those things where, there's so much, especially when it comes to the world of entertainment, there's so many things that people are afraid to discuss because they're afraid of who they're going to offend or who they're going to, who they may, kind of push off and, oh, well, I might not want to write like that because that means that this certain group of people aren't going to buy my book. And, it's one of those you can't communicate that way. You have to communicate with a message that you believe in. I mean, it's why one of my favorite Catholic saints is Saint Peter Damian, doctor of the church. This was a guy, he lived back in 11th century, and he was another one that he was going to step forward and he was going to say what needed to be said regardless of who it offended.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm just going to go ahead and tell the audience the 3 hot topics just so they know.
Okay.
Is that okay that I do that? Can I give that away?
I think we can get away with that.
Okay. All right. So we'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to witness the miraculous and walk where saints have walked? This is your chance. Join me, Lori Balderas, host of Fresh Catholic Podcast, and Father Matthew Miguel, as we walk with you through Italy's most sacred sites. From the Eucharistic miracles of Lanciano and Orvieto to the peace of Assisi, your heart will be transformed by these extraordinary moments of grace. You'll walk the hallowed streets of Rome, step into the history of the Vatican, and witness the places where faith has flourished for centuries. Each stop deepens your journey. Each miracle renews your soul. We invite you to join us on an unforgettable, life-changing experience.
Join us and let your faith come alive in Italy.
And we're back. Okay, so that was a little teaser to get them to come back after the break, see? So just so we can kind of, draw people into this book, because again, when I started reading it, I didn't really know what I was getting into. And so part of me doesn't want to tell the audience because I'd like them to just read it and kind of feel like I did. But I do feel like I don't want to dive in too deep because I want to draw people to read the book. But what's really interesting is the character in this book, he, like many people today, feels like he has a really good idea about what his thoughts and feelings are. He doesn't feel like he wants to change his thoughts and feelings. He feels very strong about them. He feels very righteous in them. And he feels like he knows better than anybody, and he's not going to listen to what anybody has to say. Is that fair to say about Stephen?
Very much.
So then he's met with a mysterious character who is Dolan, right?
Yes.
Dolan. And Dolan, I have a vision of him, and then you have a vision of him. Anyway, I thought he was an amazing character because, we'll just say it. He's the one of the bad guys. I won't say which one because you said there's a bad one and a worse one. So we'll just let the audience, figure that out. But Stephen is met with 3 different subject matters that he thinks he's an expert on, and he's just not going to learn he doesn't want to know any other view of it except for his view. So one is being gun control.
Yes.
One is abortion.
Yes.
And one is trans issues.
Yes.
Okay. So those, I would say, are huge topics. Now, to take all 3 of those on in one story it's like I say, it's brave, it's risky, but I have to say, the way that this is presented in this book, if people, whatever your stance is on anything, if you would read this book with an open mind and just listen to what's being said, how it's being presented, the story that's being presented, you don't have to agree with it, but to read it as, I just think it's a very thought-provoking book that makes you walk away going, what do I think about that? Maybe I don't feel the way I thought I did. Or maybe I feel even more strong, and this is a piece of trash novel. I don't think anybody's going to think that. But I read it in a few different ways. I read it with, I was going, bravo, bravo. You're saying stuff that I think a lot of us feel, but you're saying it out loud. And then I was also thinking, if I were Stephen, there's a lot of Stephens, quote, quote,
yes,
Stephens in the world that just don't want to think any other way. They don't want to be reasonable. They don't want to talk. They don't want to see why somebody feels the way they do. I think this could be eye-opening for those people, because there's lots of people that feel the same way Stephen does in this book.
Yes. And, specifically, and I want to make sure to clarify when it comes to the whole trans topic, the aspect of that that's touched on in this book is the gender transition of minors.
Right. Right. Yes. So thank you for clarifying that. Yes, because that is something that we should all be concerned with. We should all,
Yes.
Want the best for our children. And even for the people who have trans children or who, are dealing with those issues. One of what I feel is a misconception about the Catholic faith is that we're labeled as being hateful or Nazis or these different things when we are not for something. And it's more that I feel that we come from everything with love, like Christ wants us to do. We love all types of people. We want the best for all types of people. We're not going out and trying to hurt and harm other people. At least the Catholics I know. I'm not friends with all the Catholics in the world, but I'm working on it. No, just kidding. But I feel like our general agenda is love, care, kindness, service. But we want the best for people. We don't want people to be put in a position that's hurting or harming them or others. We want to be sure that people have a Christ-like attitude. And it doesn't mean we like what everybody's doing. And that's not just the trans community. That's not just, certain groups of people. It's people in general. We want everybody to be okay and healthy. But we also don't enable things, or do things that are against what God's plan was, So I just feel like the way you handled the story, and again, I don't want to give too much away. I guess my thing is that I am so enthusiastic about this story because I do think it's very eye-opening about these topics. I think the way it's handled, again, makes you think, how do I feel about this? What would I do in this situation? It also puts yourself in Stephen's shoes to see, why does he think the way he does? I'm fascinated by that. What, not just in this book, but why do people have their stance on things? Something's caused them to think that way,
And as you mentioned, the book is meant to be very thought-provoking. And the approach that I tried to take was an approach of, you hear, what the majority opinion is on both sides of all three of these issues. But what I tried to do was I tried to approach it from a unorthodox perspective. It addresses gun control, but it addresses it from this particular perspective, or the transition of minors from this perspective. And it's meant to be thought-provoking, and it's meant to try and get people to, even people who are completely on the opposite end of the spectrum of the church, to get them to at least sit down and think about these things from these other perspectives.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. If people would stop and read this book with a a curious, open mind, and then, walk away with it however they like, whatever they think. But I do think, like I just said before, everybody has their reasons they think a certain way, or, an experience that made them go a different direction or something. But I think, to me, this is a cautionary tale of how people should be very mindful about what their thoughts and actions are doing for the future. Plan ahead. right now you're thinking in the moment. You're thinking, this is a great idea. I'm just trying to, solve a problem immediately and fix this thing immediately. But as we know as Catholics, everything takes time. Everything is,
And that's
go ahead.
And that's something else that I wanted to try and get people to do is, think about things, especially these particular topics, as okay, yeah, there's this solution that is going to produce what they think is desirable in a day, a week, a month, but what is this actually going to do, several months, several years down the road?
Right. Exactly. And people, most of the time when you see somebody going to do something that if you're older and wiser, or even if you're younger and wiser, and you say to somebody, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to regret that. That's going to be something down the road that you're not, anticipating. And, that's hopefully when we get older and we've gone through a life and we're wise, I was a teenager. I didn't listen to everything I was told, for sure. I had to really stumble and fall on my face. And literally and figuratively, I really screwed up. I messed up. And then when I had my children, I tried to, say, you don't want to do what I did, and I have to say, my children listened for the most part. They were like, okay, she loves us. I don't know how I got so lucky with those two. I have another one that was a little harder because he has a mental problem, but the other two were, for the most part, they were like, our mom loves us and she knows best. But I do know that that's a thing where they don't want to listen. They're like, I'm not going to listen to you. And then they do suffer the consequence. But I think nowadays, what I've noticed, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how old you are, but I have a feeling, you're a good 10 years younger than me. But I feel like back in the day, when I would do something wrong, okay, or I would go against my parents' wishes and they say, don't do that because, in other words, like, you don't touch the stove and then you do it and you burn your hand, right?
Right.
I think back in the day, mom and dad let you touch the stove because they warned you and you did it anyway and you got burned. And they're like, see, I told you not to do that. In this day and age, people aren't allowing people to, they're trying to help and say, don't do that. And then the person, they try to buffer it too much. And I appreciated that in this book, Stephen is bound and determined to make these choices and decisions. He's warned, he's given little, are you sure you want to do that? And then he does it anyway.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I like that he has to suffer the repercussions of things. He's not, I don't think everybody should always be let off the hook. I think they should feel the burn of the stove because, I don't feel like anybody's really learning a lesson these days. Right now, there's things that are going to come up in the future. And, we can see it. I can see it as plain as day. But for whatever reason, they just have their blinders on. They don't want to know. They don't want to listen to reason. They think people are being mean-spirited. I certainly don't see it that way. I see it as people are hoping and wishing that they'll change their mind and they'll kind of snap out of it. I feel like everybody's they're in this, I don't even know how to describe it. It worries me for people,
Well, and as you described, I grew up in a very similar parental mindset of, when I was a kid, essentially, if it wasn't gonna, you know, significantly harm me, scar me, disfigure me, that kind of thing, if it wasn't gonna do that, okay, yeah, let the kid make a mistake because, as has been written about countless times, experience is the greatest teacher. And I think it's a combination of that plus, you're talking about some of the younger generation. I think that there are some who they've not been they've not been in a position where they actually see repercussions And so you have some people who are out there right now and they think that, if they make a mistake, somebody's going to come along with a magic wand and they're going to wave it and everything's going to be all better. And that's not reality.
Right. That's very, very true. And also, I've said this a lot recently. I feel like when people are getting involved in things that are hurting themselves and others, or they're going against God's plan, or, they're doing things that are violent or hostile or aggressive or any of these things, they're hurting their bodies, they're hurting other people's bodies. These are forms of things, that lead you to sin. And God doesn't want us to sin. God wants us to turn to him for everything. God doesn't want us to get a quick fix. He doesn't want us to hurt, and harm ourselves, that he made us these beautiful beings. He doesn't make mistakes. He made us exactly how he wants us to be made. And, other people, I feel, have a hidden agenda. And, a lot of it has to do with power and money and just like, I don't even know some of their motivations of why they're doing what they're doing. But, again, just to try to reason with people and to try to, come at things with love and not, it's not going after somebody and like judging them or attacking them, or it's none of that. It's this worried, nurturing. I want to help you. I want you to find a different way. Please don't go down these paths you're going down, and they don't want to listen. And we do have to, let God handle it. It comes to a point where we have to try to make people, hopefully to not make bad decisions. But then there comes a point where we have to let God handle it, because he sees the bigger picture. He knows what's going to happen. And we just have to, step back and allow him to do that. And that it's really hard, especially if it's people around you that you love and you want the best for them. And especially like with our children or our grandchildren or whatever, we don't want them to be struggling and everything. But there are things that they do need to struggle through, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Right. And another thing I think that is being almost ignored in today's day and age is, people they want to kind of turn a blind eye and act like, uh, dark, nefarious people or dark, nefarious forces aren't out there when they absolutely are. And it's just one of those things that, that's why we need to be more cognizant and we need to pay better attention, because there are these things out there. And, ignoring them is not going to going to make them go away. In fact, I
Right.
mean, what was it? Just a few weeks ago, we had an individual who was furthered in the sainthood process, and he is a former satanic priest,
Oh,
and that is blessed. Can't remember his first name. Last name is Longo. But he was a priest. He was in Italy, and he went to college, and he started getting in with the wrong crowd. He actually became a member of the Satanic Church, became a priest for them, and you know, thanks be to God, somebody got to him, somebody talked to him and completely turned him around, and he spent the rest of his life, trying to make sure that people didn't make that mistake that he made. And it's been so extraordinary that he's in the middle of the sainthood process.
wow. Yeah, and yeah, it like we're saying, it's just there's a lot of choices in the world. Obviously, we have to hope that we make better choices so that we can, repent And, that's a big thing. There's many people that are just submerged in sin. They don't know how to get out of it. They don't want to get out of it. It's all in God's timing if they do get out of it. But like I said, we kind of have to try with them. We have to, pray for them and hope that they change. But this book to me, like, it's one of those books where I think it's shocking. It's like, like he's just kind of going along thinking, excuse me, thinking he knows everything about everything. And then he is met with kind of some shocking revelations, I would say. And, I'm not going to tell you what happens because I want you to read the book, but I just thought it was very well executed. And,
Thank you.
like I said, I don't think there's a point that I go, oh, that was my favorite part or or there was a lull. I just think I love the whole thing. But I have a few more questions for you when we come back. We have to take another quick break. Okay. We'll be right back. Let me tell you about all things Fresh Catholic. So buckle up. We have a podcast with weekly topic episodes and Fresh Catholic Daily, the daily Mass readings, on all platforms and YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. That would really help. Our website, freshcatholic.com, has an online store with merchandise and coffee, a blog, comics, info about our pilgrimage to Italy in September of this Jubilee year, and Fresh Catholic courses with educator Charles Merritt, including the Hail Mary, the Our Father, Sin, Sacraments and Grace, Advent, Angels, and Virtues. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Fresh Catholic with short videos every day. Email me at lori@freshcatholic.com. I'd love to hear from you. And please consider becoming a Patreon or sponsor to help support our mission of drawing people to the faith or back to the faith. Phew! Spread the word and join the fun. Thanks so much. Bye. And we're back. Okay, I was just telling Jeff in the break that I just have so much more about this book I'd like to say, but I can't because I don't want to give it away. I want you all to order it. And we'll have a link to the book in our show notes, right? And they can just order it from the link. Excellent.
Yes.
You're going to get, as soon as we're done with this podcast, you all go to the show notes, go to the link, and please order it. It's so good, and read it for yourself. And it's a fast read. It's like, probably because I didn't want to put it down, but it moves along. It'll be, a good read for everybody. So I have to ask you, why did you decide to write this? Like, what was your epiphany to say, this is what I want to write, at this point? Like, did something happen that triggered this story for you?
It's kind of an interesting story because I've been wanting to write a book similar to this for a while. And like I said, about a year and a half ago, something just inspired me. And the more I got into the book and the more I started writing it, the more I was like, okay, this is actually a book that, it kind of breaks the mold. It's not it's of course not your classic, Catholic story, but it's one of those where people can take this and they recognize things in the world and in society right now, and they see where the two kind of blend together.
Okay. And then, okay. What do you consider the message of this book to be?
I think that there are three main messages in this book. I think the first one is, you know, as I said earlier, there are some dark people, there are some dark entities in the world, and we need to be cognizant of it. We need to pay attention to, what we're doing, what we're getting involved in. We need to know, church teaching. And then probably the second message is, you know, as I mentioned about the dark entities, we need to realize that the dark entities that are out there, they're not going to be in red spandex and pitchforks, and they're not going to have horns coming out of their head. They're not going to be, spewing pea soup at people. They're going to look like a regular, average, everyday person. It may even be somebody that's just a couple tables down from you in a restaurant. And then the third thing is, um, regardless of what we get into, whatever we end up finding ourselves in, and whatever mistakes we may make, um, it's not the end all be all. There's a path out of it. That's one of the wonderful things about our church is we have a proverbial army of of clergy, of lay people who that's what they've dedicated their entire lives to, is helping people who have found themselves in these situations and have been the path or the help for us when we make a mistake to get out of it and get you know, back into God's grace.
That's right. And, to circle back on what you just said about, when there's bad people out there or bad situations, it's not always going to be really apparent to us. And I think that's the thing is, people are being disguised, and children and just honestly everybody, they get sucked in because the person that's doing something to try to get them into something, that's going to send them down a bad path, they don't look sinister necessarily. They could be the most wonderful person you think, and they say the right words, or they say, like they have certain things in common with you, allegedly, and then they take you down this path, and it's right into, a deep, dark path. And again, it's like, if you look at it on the surface of like, oh, I've done this, there's no turning back, I can't make it better. You can, if you're repentant and you're truly repentant and you mean it and you want to make it better. But I've said this in 1,000 different times. You can't go to God and con God. You can't say, oh, I'm so sorry. He knows when you're sorry and when you're not sorry. He knows when you're really repentant. He wants you to make the right choices and decisions. He wants to forgive you so that you can move on with your life. But then there's the people that just don't want to do that. They don't think they need God. They don't want to follow what his plan is, even though he has the best plan. They think they know better. They suffer the consequences. But I know Simon and I, in particular, just in recent years, had somebody who we thought was just this wonderful person in our life, and it turned out they were not at all what they said they were. And we had to learn that in a very intense way, and it was very devastating. And I never in a million years, even at my age, I totally fell for it. And, you would just never know. You have to be very careful and very cautious of people, and people don't always have your best interest at heart. And, so that's a really good part of this lesson. And then the other, I really do like what you're saying about, you can redeem yourself. You can, go to the Lord. That's the only place you're going to, be able to fix this. You have to admit what you did. You have to humble yourself. You have to, just drop to your knees literally, and, just beg forgiveness and mercy, but mean it and want to change, and, so, I mean, I think, I don't know if that's exactly how Stephen felt in this book, but I just think, Stephen was just, again, he's kind of what I would call a very typical case study of people today. And I think, he's what you don't want to be. what not to do. Like there's all the how-to books. He's what not to do.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a very edgy book. It's definitely, I just think so many people can get so much out of this book. What do you hope to accomplish like with this book as far as, not success, like, I don't mean that. I'm talking about like, what do you hope is going to be, what's your biggest goal with the message?
With the message, my goal is to essentially, take these people who are kind of at least on the fringes. They're kind of in support of abortion under certain circumstances, or they're kind of in support of gun control under certain circumstances, and I'm hoping to have people like that to actually read the book and look at these topics from these different perspectives that not too many people talk about, and at least get them to sit down and ask themselves questions. Okay, I didn't really look at it that way. I didn't really think of it with that kind of impact. Is this something I really need to reconsider?
The word impact is a perfect word for this, because again, people, make a decision. I'm going to have an abortion. I'm going to go shoot this gun. I'm going to, provide this surgery, whether I'm the doctor, the parent, another adult, for this child, to change their gender. I'm going to do all these things. Nobody is thinking about not just the future, not just the consequences, but the impact on what's happening around you. Like, it's not just about you. It's about,
Right.
we're in this all together. Like, what is it doing to impact your family? Everything. It's everything. Your future, your family, everything. The people around you, people you don't even know. That's the ticket. There is the impact. It's like, I was in this really bad car accident, and years and years ago, the anniversary of it is actually coming up as we record this. It's day after tomorrow. It's a very bittersweet day to me because my entire life changed. I became permanently disabled, paralyzed, and had a baby on the same day. And it was a big day. And so even to this day, 35 years later, my beautiful blonde daughter is going to have her birthday. God bless her that she made it through that accident. But, I went to counseling with a pastor afterward, and he said, you were saved for a reason, and you don't know who this accident is going to impact, people you don't even know. It's going to change your life, your children's lives, everybody around you's life. But there's going to be people in the world that know about this that you're going to affect, and you don't even know it. Well, he meant that in a positive way. Now, it did affect some people in a negative way. It really hurt a lot of people, this accident.
Right.
But you can affect people in a really positive way with the choices you make, and you can affect them and have impact on them in a very negative way. And I feel that this book is really a warning of there's more to these decisions than your decision in the moment, because you're trying to make a snap quickie decision and you're not thinking about anything else. And, so it's very, very, again, very thought-provoking. I give it an A++. Like I said, I think I'm your biggest fan. I mean, I feel like I've been gushing and I've let you barely talk, but I just think it's such a great book. I'm really
Thank you.
happy for you that you wrote this. I can't wait to read another book of yours. I think, this is just super rich in everything about it. The way you describe things, and the story is Excellent. So, have I been your best review yet?
Definitely top five.
Top 5. I'll take it. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my goodness. So is there anything you wanted to say to my audience before I let you go that you didn't get to say? I know I probably didn't let you talk, but is there anything you'd like to say?
Just when you read the book, and I feel, and I've actually had this told to me by people who have finished the book. They say that this book is very interesting because when you go through and you read it, then you can actually go back through and read it like a second and third time, and there are little things that are hidden in the book that you may not necessarily catch the first time. And there's like, because and I know, because I intentionally I put certain little almost like church teachings type pieces throughout the book, as kind of a, you know, you can tell a really good, compelling, riveting story, but it can still have that church teaching kind of, in the, in the, below the radar type situation.
Yeah. And also, one last thing. I know you and I were talking, I'm not going to say this exactly how you did, but when you read the book, there's a portion of the book that I envisioned in color, like where it's like colorful and normal colors and, and then I'll just say that Stephen gets into a limo. Okay. And the color palette changes. Let's just say that it becomes a different color palette. And I was also, so it's, it goes a little dark and sinister. So it's like, there's parts of it that I envision in color and parts that are more sinister for sure. And I was also telling you, because we're filmmakers, I immediately was like, oh, well, this has to be a movie. And so if there's anybody out there that wants to donate money to make this a movie, Simon Balderas and I will make this movie. I'm just going to throw our hat into the ring because it would be an amazing movie. I already have it pictured. I already have it cast. No. I already have the locations. No, so that's my forte. I'm the set designer too. And then Simon Balderas will turn it into a masterpiece. So if anybody, I'm serious, if anybody is interested in funding this to be a movie after you read the book, contact Fresh Catholic and let's make it happen. I'm dead serious.
Yes.
No pun intended. Okay. So anyway, I so appreciate you coming today. I know we had some technical difficulties to begin with, and Satan was trying to squash this and not let us do this interview. But guess what, Satan? Once again, we beat you. So thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on your show and to be able to tell people about this book, because I really truly believe that, it is I believe it's a really good book. I think it is a book that can help many people.
Yes, and I think it could be life-changing to people to read this book. So that's my hope for it. I wish you all the biggest success.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming today. All right,
Thank
everybody, go to that link, click that link, order that book. You won't be sorry. Thank you for coming today. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is produced, edited, and recorded in Ventura, California.